Hello, this is Dr. Kramer with an example of a visual analysis. I created this several years back for use with my Humanities 1301 students. And so if you look at the PDF of this slideshow, it will say Huma 1301. So just an FYI. You should have watched the Black Sails title sequence already, linked on the week 7 instructions before you watch this video. Otherwise, it won't make much sense. Black Sails was this title sequence you see is from 2014. It is a TV series on the Starz network. The creative directors are Karen Fogg and Michelle Doherty, and the artistic director is Alan Williams. And then I have the link to the title sequence there. Now, due to copyright issues, I'm not actually going to play the title sequence for you on YouTube, but you can find it at that website. I also want to point out that in your paper, it's very important that you give this kind of information. The name of the piece, obviously, its year, and then who the artists were that were responsible for it. So if it's something that's a moving image like a film, you want to talk about the creative directors, the artistic director, the director, someone like that. Not the actual performers in the piece, unless those people also directed. All right, Black Sails is a historical fiction television series, a prequel to Robert Louis Stevenson's novel Treasure Island, and it is set during the golden age of piracy, which occurred between the 1650s and the 1730s. The series begins in 1715 and features several real-life historical figures like Anne Bonny, Benjamin Hornigold, Jack Rackham, Charles Vane, and Blackbeard. The first season centers around the hunt for the Spanish treasure galleon Urca de Lima. The pirates in the show have been declared enemies of mankind and in response declare war against the world. The title sequence for the series argues that the world of the series considers pirates and ordinary citizens alike because of their common destiny, death. Okay, so did you see what I did there? I'm going to annotate a little bit. I gave a brief sketch of the premise of the show, which is important if you're doing a title sequence or if you're summarizing, say, a music video. So I gave some background information, and then I gave my argument about the visuals. Artistic director Alan Williams stated in an interview that he wished to convey a sense of doom throughout the title sequence with the rising Sea of Fate. The Sea of Fate motif is present right from the opening of the title sequence, with the actors' names hovering above an ocean reflecting the light of a moon. We never see the moon in this title sequence, only its reflection. Deep water is an ancient trope for death, so the directors indicate this theme right from the beginning of the sequence. The next shot pans slowly over some kind of structure faintly resembling the prow of a ship. You can clearly see a cross at the top and lions on what looks like the top of a shield in the bottom half of the frame. We're not quite sure what we're looking at, but we do know that it's marble. Though these images have nothing to do with death, they perhaps represent the tradition that the pirates are coming out of, English Christianity. They flee these influences to become lawless pirates. The black and white photograph continues throughout the whole title sequence, achieving the chiaroscuro effect common to Baroque painting. The cross and the small lions to the left of the large one are the most well lit, indicating Christianity and the British Empire as sources of moral rectitude. However, the larger lion fades into the darkness, perhaps indicating a dark side to the British Empire. Here we see a woman's head. This statuary head of a woman is the first human figure in the title sequence. We see her from below, and her head seems to spring out of foliage and shells, and her hair waves to become one with the vine patterns. However, there is something sinister about the hand to the bottom left. Do you see it there? The S and C curves in this shot are reminiscent of the Rococo style and indicate life and vitality. But this life and vitality has a darker edge. The hand reaching out of it may hint that the foliage is taking over humanity, that civilization will ultimately succumb to the forces of nature. Okay, I'm going to pause a little bit and just talk about what I've been doing in these last two slides. So I'm looking at these visual shots and I am close reading them. I am looking at them carefully. Now I've already determined kind of the theme that I'm going to be talking about, which is death. I did not come to that theme randomly and then start trying to make it fit these pictures. I close read the whole title sequence first, looking for details like this, and then I made my thesis. The other thing that you'll note is I'm bringing up a lot of art type things in here, like you heard me say Rococo and Baroque, and later on I'll make some more art references. That is perfectly fine for you to do. Just make sure if it moves beyond common knowledge that you give a citation. All right, let's go to the next shot. This next shot also combines elements of nature's vitality mixed with doom, emphasizing the title sequence's argument that all life ends in death. This woman is seen in 3/4 scale. Her dress ripples and combines with the vines, and she is blowing into a pipe. She may be playing pleasant music or sounding a warning. Tucked in underneath the coral and beside the curling seashell, a cannon peeks out, reminding the viewer that this series is about death. We have an old man with a rod. The woman in the pipe is followed by this old man with a rod in the sequence of the titles. The rod seems to combine into the vines below him and to become part of the creeping foliage, which can be seen overtaking the architectural features. The long marble banister. The plants on the top left of the screen are exotic and look vaguely dangerous. One of them resembles a Venus flytrap. The man is old but vigorous and seems to be struggling with something. Could this be death itself? The title sequence's artistic influences include the sculpture of Baroque sculptor Bernini, sculptor Rodin's The Gates of Hell, and scrimshaw, or carving on a whale tusk. Not only does this artwork share the white and black palette of the title sequence, but it also depicts death in the midst of life. Bernini's sculpture in particular shows a sense of fluid motion, like in the sculpture of Daphne escaping Apollo's advances. She is in the midst of turning into a tree, much like the figures in the Black Sails title sequence are in the midst of becoming vegetation themselves, a subtle reference to what happens after we die and return to the soil. We also see in the Rodin sculpture, it's the gates of hell, so there's obviously the life and death, and even in the piece of scrimshaw, that could not be made were it not for the death of the whale from which it came. The next shot zooms out so that the viewer can see the whole piece from which the woman's head, the woman blowing the horn, and the old man can now be seen in context. The overgrowth of vegetation is particularly noticeable here, with the old man battling against the unruliness of nature. The artist combines vines and leaves with seashells, and in soft focus behind the structure, the hint of a ship's rigging can be seen. At the bottom of the piece, however, a tiny skull appears, anchoring the abundant life in the inevitability of death. This technique of combining life, especially vegetal life, with images of death is a common feature of Baroque vanitas still life paintings, which often feature decay. Doom is ever present, even in the artwork, indicating that Black Sails will be a show that emphasizes the mortality of all life on Earth. The third way the directors visually argue their theme of death, in addition to black and white and Rococo Baroque elements, is with the juxtaposition of marble with metal. All the skeletons in the title sequence are made of metal and often interact with the marble figures. Death in Black Sails is a threat not just for pirates, but also for women. None can escape the hands of death. This shot demonstrates that not only is mortal flesh doomed to expire, but also human artistic achievement. The composition sets a drum-beating skeleton on a diagonal from a seated marble figure, who might be Apollo. The lyre indicates human artistic achievement, as do the architectural elements vaguely reminiscent of Gothic cathedrals, Romanesque churches, and Islamic mosques. Ironically, it is the skeleton figure made of metal that seems more lively. He is caught in the midst of playing the drum in the Baroque sculptural style that incorporates space as a kind of invisible complement to indicate movement. The seated Apollo, presumably alive, is passive, and his instrument is silent. He is lit from heavenly light from above, but the skeleton is also lit, perhaps indicating that God is the author of death, as well as light. Water comes back into the title sequence, indicating the rising sea of fate that will drown all souls, no matter their station. This head is blindfolded, which not only shows that humans are oblivious to their destiny, but also obscures the head's gender. We don't know if it is a man or a woman. The head is made of metal instead of marble, indicating that death is near, and we seem to have returned to our original moonlit sea. In the only erotic scene in this title sequence, a cut shot reveals the torsos of a nude male and female figure. The texture of the sculpture is extremely lifelike, with the imperfections of the marble mirroring the differences in skin tone. Art and culture critic Camille Paglia has argued that sex and violence are main contributors to artistic creativity in Western culture. The two are often conflated. Think of all the sex scenes in James Bond movies, and all the dangerous, death-defying action scenes as well. By including this life-affirming image, after all, a natural consequence of sex is reproduction, the title sequence is arguing that the series will have its life-affirming moments as well, but that drive to seek sex may ultimately be a desire to avoid death. In a series of jump cuts that erratically zoom in, the title sequence moves rapidly to the drama of a duel, sword versus pistol. The first combatant shown is the swordsman. His expression and pose are pristinely carved, and yet he is caught in an act of violence, indicating that death is beautiful in its way. His victim, the gunman, is zoomed out on in a series of rapid jump cuts. The metal blood spurt indicates that his wound is fatal. The space around the figure acts as the invisible complement. Creative director Karen Fogg states that, quote, using sculpture allowed us to be far more violent and provocative than live action or photorealism would have allowed, close quote. One reason is that the viewer finishes the story, so to speak, internally, her brain painting images of what happened before and after the image frozen here for her consideration. We move from a close-up scene involving just a dueling pair to a wider shot. By far the largest object in this scene is the marble head, gagged. The head can see what is around him, but can say nothing. The focus in this shot gradually changes from what is seen around him. The focus in this shot gradually changes from the head to the items in the foreground, which includes vegetable, human, animal, and architectural objects, and in a chaotic jumble. In a sense, the man may be contemplating the past events of his life, perhaps the destruction he has caused. There are visual references to a domed building and a spire. The halo-like shape that looms behind the marble head is a similar shape to the Statue of Liberty's crown. This shot argues that man's works are subject to decay and destruction, just like man's body, another subtle reference to the title sequence's overall theme of mortality. This group of shot stills illustrates how the designers use quick cuts and close-ups to achieve a sense of action and impending doom. In this shot on the left, the camera shows us the torso of a man holding some kind of staff or pike. There is no real context for the shot, but we get a sense of forward motion. In the shot at the left, we get an orienting wide-angle shot and can now see the torso bellows to the man in the front. His disheveled appearance indicates that he is not a professional soldier. The entire group is mismatched, in different clothing styles and holding different kinds of weapons, including a dagger, a sword, and a long rifle. The final still shot here is of a man falling with a shocked expression on his face. Death is surprising him. His position and open mouth mirror that of a gargoyle from a Gothic cathedral. This series of shots demonstrates the director's use of implied action and demonstrates the overall theme of death. Just visible in the top right photo is the black sea of fate, which has been slowly rising. The falling man is about to crash into that very sea. In this jump cut shot, we finally get to see enough of a ship to clearly identify it as a ship. It is presented at a tilt, and we only see the mast and riggings. No sails are present, perhaps indicating that this is a ghost ship. The black sea of fate swells behind the ship, which is presented to emphasize the cross shape of his rigging and mast. The intersection of beams hides the source of light, the moon. The ship is lonely and abandoned, its crew presumably dead, and the vessel drifting aimlessly to whatever fate awaits it. In the final cut, we get the show's title, Black Sails. Black sails are associated with pirates who raised them to intimidate other ships, but they also are associated with the Greek myth of Theseus. The ship on which he was to return to his native land mistakenly used black sails to indicate Theseus's death. The title of the series indicates that it will be about both pirates and death. The struggle portrayed here between the skeleton and the man again uses the metal versus marble juxtaposition to demonstrate humankind's eternal struggle against death. Presumably the first one to the top will be the victor on this occasion, and it looks like the marble man has a slight advantage. Behind him, the sea of fate lies dark and forbidding. The title sequence for Black Sails, using black and white, Baroque and Rococo, and marble and metal, argues that man's mortality dooms his endeavors. They will all be ultimately swallowed up by the sea of fate.